Today we're going to learn how to spin on a drop spindle. There are lots of different kinds of spindles out there, and we're going to use this one. And I'm not going to spend too much time talking about different kinds of spindles because there are as many kinds of spindles as there are kinds of dogs out there. There are just so many. So we're going to focus on this one. This one has, let me go over the parts of the spindle first so you know what I'm talking about. This part is called the shaft. It's just the long part. And this is where we're going to wind our wool and store it once we've spun it. This part here is called the whorl, and it is the part that whirls around when you spin it. And then at the top, we have a hook on our spindle, and that's what we're going to hang our yarn from as we're spinning it. So one of the first things you're going to want to do before we start spinning is decide which direction you feel most comfortable spinning, because you can spin your yarn either direction. It doesn't matter, and it's really just up to the spinner. And so you want to get kind of comfortable. When I spin with the spindle in my left hand because I'm right-handed. So I write with my right hand and I spin the spindle with my left hand. That way my right hand can do the holding of the fiber up here. You could probably do it the other direction too. You could give it a try and see what works best for you. But I think I've seen most people do it in this direction who are right-handed. I also prefer to spin my spindle clockwise, which when you're spinning it is kind of it's like it's going, I feel like it's going away from me. I'm pushing out like that with my fingers rather than pulling in. So let me come up closer so you can see what I mean. So when I spin, I usually go like that. You could also go like this. I don't do that as well, but you see how that one's coming sort of, my fingers are coming back towards me. The way I do it, my fingers push away from me. So if you hold your spindle really loosely in one hand that you're not going to spin with, and then just kind of try to spin it, and I'm sort of resting the whorl on my hand to see what feels best. Just kind of get a feel for which direction you like to spin. All right, and now I'm going to show you how we get started. So you have some nice wool yarn here to start our spinning with. And this yarn, I have to tell you, it's not yarn, it's wool. This wool came from the sheep that my niece raised. She has, well, I don't think she has it anymore, but she had a little sheep that she took care of. And my niece is an adult, by the way. She's not a little girl, but she's 21 years old. And she does a lot of fiber work. And so she raised this sheep and she sheared her sheep. And then she took her wool to a fiber mill where they washed it and carded it into these nice long pieces. And another thing I want to talk about before we get going, before we actually start putting this onto the spindle, is one of the things that we're going to do is called drafting the wool. And to draft the wool, and I don't want you to do this with me just yet, just watch me first, and we'll do it together in a little bit. But drafting the wool is just pulling it apart a little bit. So now we've talked about this in class a little bit, I think, when we talk about breaking our yarn, or if we have a big long piece of wool stuffing that we're going to use. And I've told you that if you hold it really close together, it won't really stretch apart. It won't want to break because it's really strong fiber. So if you want to stretch it out, you have to have your hands kind of far apart. And let me kind of show you what it looks like when we draft it. I'm going to come over here so I don't get it too thin right now. But we put our hands fairly far apart, and then we just slowly draft it, and you can see those fibers just sort of slowly coming apart. And that way the fibers are still overlapping each other, and that makes it easier for us to get a really long strand of yarn that's twisted. And we're going to be doing that a lot so you might give that a try. Just practice drafting a little bit. And be careful that we don't break it all the way apart. Just a little bit of drafting right now, because we're gonna draft this some more as we get going. But first we wanna get a little bit drafted out. And we might even want to, this might even be a little thick for our yarn right now, unless we wanna make really thick yarn. So how thick your yarn is depends on how long you draft it and how kind of thin you get this drafted area. So now let me show you how we get this onto our spindle. So once I've drafted a bit and made it kind of thin, there are a couple ways to do this. I'm gonna show you the way I think is kind of the easiest way to do it. I'm gonna find a good center part of that drafted wool and I'm gonna put it on the hook. And my knees, I should be seated while doing this because my knees are gonna work a lot in this with this kind of spindle. I'm gonna hold the spindle with my knees. I'm gonna put the wool on my hook, about like that. Then I'm gonna pinch those two parts together and spin. Now I wanna get to a point, you can see that my yarn is starting to twist on itself right in here, just a little bit. It's like it's almost too twisty. So then, I come in here, I park my spindle with my knees. So we park, that means it's gonna stay put for a minute. I park and draft. So now here, I'm gonna pinch right at the base of that twisty part. I'm gonna draft a little bit. And then I'm going to release and my yarn will twist. Now sometimes I get a little bit of a wide bump right there and I just give that a little help. I twist it just a little bit. Now I can feel in mine that I'm gonna need more twist than this to keep going. Sometimes you get enough twist that you can draft a couple times, but I don't think I have enough twist in it, so I'm gonna go ahead and keep twisting until I get that feeling like it's doubling up on itself a little bit. And then I'm gonna park, pinch, draft, and let that spin out. And then I'm gonna give that a little bit of help. Make sure that that twist is really getting to all of the yarn. And then I think I still need a little bit more. Now, if you let go at this point, it'll start to untwist, so you don't wanna let go. So I'm gonna keep spinning. Now I'm feeling I've got so much yarn on my spindle here that I want to really give it a good spin. So I park, I draft, and I let it spin. And you see, I've still got a lot of twist in my yarn. So I'm just gonna draft a little bit farther. Now if it's not pulling apart for you, your hands might be a little too close together. You wanna be close enough together that you don't get a lot of yarn or wool building up right here and have it super thin right here. But you want to be far enough apart that the fibers will split. Now see, I got a nice good twist in there too. And it takes a lot of practice. I can feel that I don't have enough. I do have a lot of, I still have it doubling up like that, but I don't feel like I have enough to really get a good twist in my yarn. So I'm gonna keep going. And I think I'm gonna get one more draft and spin out of this before I need to wind my yarn around the shaft of my spindle. So I'll show you that in a second. So park, and then I'll draft. And spin. Draft a little more, and if you see a bunch of little bits of hay or whatever in here, little sticks, you can kind of pick them out as you go. Now I'm getting to the point where I'm really reaching. I'm about at the end of my reach here. So now I'm gonna wind this, and I don't want it to fall off of that hook. So I'm gonna go to the back of the hook, and I'm gonna start wrapping this. I'm gonna push it down onto the shaft with my thumb, and then I'm gonna start winding it. And I can just spin the spindle, twist it. And then when I'm ready to, I want to put this back on, I don't want it to be right up next to that, so I'm going to untwist it just a little bit. And I like to also come from behind here and hook it so that it looks like that. So they're both kind of on top of each other. And that way, as it's spinning, it's less likely to fall off of the hook. So now I'll do it a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and spin, park, pinch, oop, pick out a little something, draft the wool, and let it spin up. Spin, park, pinch and draft, and let it spin. Now when I'm finished spinning for a while, I can again come back in that direction, and I can wrap my, again, I'm gonna sort of push it down, wrap it around a little bit, and that's pretty good. I could also kind of hook that around there so that it won't go anywhere. And then when I'm ready to spin again, I just undo it. Whoops. And get ready to spin. Remember that when it's time to wind around the shaft, to unhook the yarn, oops, and hopefully it doesn't get stuck to your leader yarn, and then spin around so you don't have too much stuff wound around that hook. I want to show you a couple other things, some problems you might encounter, just so you understand what to do if you do have these problems. So one thing you might see is if you have these big balloons here, that usually means that maybe you need to, so I can see that my yarn actually has quite a bit of twist in it left here. I'm going to untwist this just a little bit. I still have quite a bit of twist in there. And so I want to see if I can get that to move up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull and then try to like just move my hands up and twist that wool. The reason this happened right here is because I actually joined more wool onto here, which I'll show you in just a minute, because my wool broke, which might happen to you too. And so sometimes when I join, I have a little bump, and that's okay. Sometimes I get a bump because I didn't really twist my yarn enough, or maybe I didn't draft it quite enough. So these things all just take a lot of practice, and it takes years to become really good at spinning. So be patient with yourself and just keep practicing. So let me show you what happens, what to do. This one keeps wanting to slip around on me. All right, so if I'm spinning, spin, 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 and then I draft, and I go, whoops, a little too far. Oh no, it broke. What am I gonna do? Well, that's really easy. All you have to do is just put that together, smush it together, and then I'm kind of laying this over my fingers so that it won't twist quite yet. I'm gonna smooth that other one on, and then I'm gonna hold it and let that spin. And that, it's a little bit tricky to get it to do that without a lump. I'm still not very good at doing that without a bit of a lump there. So that's okay. But see, now if I go ahead and keep spinning, that's joined together. And I've got a really good twist in there. The other thing I wanted to mention is when you do this, we're gonna park, we're gonna draft. Ooh, there's a yucky bit. When you're letting it spin after you park and draft, you wanna hold the wool really tight. Because if you don't, the spin won't travel up the wool. So right here at this point, I'm gonna hold tight up here with my right hand. It's gonna pull up as I do that, and that's gonna help that spin travel up the yarn. And then I've got a nice good spin at the top here too. So I'll do another one. Spin, spin, spin. Park. I don't like this to get twisted because it makes it harder to draft if it's getting twisted. So I was just rearranging it so it wasn't twisting. I draft, and I can actually draft here, and then I can move a little bit if I want to. I could even pre-draft a little bit up. This is tricky. Maybe don't try that. But then hold on nice and tight. Be careful you don't pull it apart holding on tight. It's kind of a balancing act. I'm gonna hold it here, and then as I release, I sort of pull up so that twist will travel up, but I'm not gonna break my yarn, my wool there. So that's just something you have to kind of feel out and practice and get the hang of. And this, don't worry if you're not getting it right away. I didn't get it right away either. I had a lot of problem yarn when I first started spinning because a lot of things can go wrong, and there's a lot that you just need to get the feel for. All right, let me know if you have any other problems that you'd like me to show you how to work out. All right, I'd love to see how your spinning is going. So leave me a picture on Seesaw.